Some childhood memories are meant to be cherished. Others, they're better left forgotten. What would you do if the laughter of your past turned into screams? Welcome to the cursed treehouse, a place where innocence ends and terror begins. 3 childhood friends, Emily, Ryan, and Chris, returned to their hometown after a decade. Their goal, to relive old memories and visit their secret hideout, the treehouse, deep in the woods. "Remember how we used to spend entire summers up there?" Emily said, smiling as they trudged through overgrown paths. But when they arrived, the sight made them pause. The treehouse, once vibrant and lively, now looked like a skeletal shell. The wood was rotting, vines strangled its frame, and a strange symbol was etched on the door. A circle with a single staring eye. Chris laughed nervously. "Well, it's not exactly how I remembered it. Think we left the creepy symbol there, too?" Ryan pushed the door open. The smell of damp wood and decay hit them like a wave. Inside, strange drawings covered the walls. Children holding hands, standing in a circle, their faces scratched out. "All right," Ryan said, breaking the silence. "Who's ready for some nostalgia?" His voice dripped with forced enthusiasm. But Emily shivered. Something wasn't right. Later that night, they decided to camp near the treehouse. As the fire crackled, Emily stared up at the dark outline of their childhood hideout. "Why do I feel like it's watching us?" she asked. Chris rolled his eyes. "It's just an old treehouse, Em. Relax." But even he couldn't explain why the air felt heavy, or why shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long. As they laughed and reminisced, a loud thud echoed from the treehouse. All 3 froze. "Probably just the wind," Ryan whispered, but his voice trembled. Chris, always the skeptic, grabbed a flashlight and climbed up. "Let's get this over with before we freak ourselves out." Inside, everything was eerily silent. But then he saw it. A single doll sitting in the corner, its head tilted, its eyes black pits. Can we just agree that creepy dolls are the universal sign to leave? Why do people always stay? The next morning they found strange marks on their arms, circles with the same eye symbol as the treehouse door. "What is this?" Emily demanded, her voice shaking. Ryan's phone buzzed. A notification popped up. Though he didn't have service. "The game begins." "What game?" Chris asked. But deep down, they all knew. Suddenly a child's laughter echoed through the woods. It was soft at first, then louder, closer. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered. The laughter turned into whispers, overlapping voices that seemed to come from everywhere. The treehouse creaked violently, as if something or someone inside was trying to get out. Desperate for answers, they searched the area and found an old journal buried under leaves near the treehouse. The entries were from a boy named David who once lived nearby. The last page read, "The treehouse demands a sacrifice. It won't let me leave until I give it what it wants. It's not just a place. It's alive." As Emily read the words aloud, the air grew colder. The whispers turned into screams, and the ground beneath them began to shake. "We need to leave. Now," Ryan said, grabbing Emily's arm. But Chris shook his head. "It won't let us. Look." The ladder to the treehouse was gone. The path they came from vanished. The treehouse doors slammed open, revealing a darkness so deep it seemed alive. The whispers turned into a single commanding voice. "One must stay." The friends stared at each other, panic setting in. "What does that mean?" Emily cried. The shadows began to move, forming figures with hollow eyes and outstretched hands. Chris stepped forward, his face pale. I think it wants one of us to stay here forever." Emily shook her head. "Number, we're leaving together." The voice boomed again. "One must stay." As the shadows closed in, Ryan grabbed the journal and shouted, "There has to be a way to break the curse. Would you make the sacrifice, or would you fight the curse?" If this gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying tales. And remember, sometimes childhood memories are best left buried. What if your childhood hideout wasn't as innocent as you thought? What if someone or something was watching you the whole time? This is the story of an invisible friend, one you wouldn't want to meet. It was the summer of 2009. A group of friends, Ben, Rachel, Kevin, and Alex, decided to build a treehouse deep in the woods behind their neighborhood. They were proud of their creation, a rickety, lopsided sanctuary held together by rusty nails and blind optimism. The treehouse became their hangout spot. It was where they shared secrets, told ghost stories, and plotted adventures. But then Kevin started acting different. One evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line, Kevin mentioned something strange. "Hey, have you guys met my friend?" he asked, staring into the shadows outside the treehouse. The group laughed. "What friend?" "Kevin, your imaginary buddy," Ben teased. But Kevin didn't laugh. "He only comes at night. He says he likes this place." Everyone dismissed it as a joke. Kids have wild imaginations, right? But that night, Rachel swore she heard whispering, soft, raspy, and definitely not from any of her friends. The next morning, as they climbed into the treehouse, Rachel froze. "Guys, what's this?" She pointed to the wooden planks. Deep, jagged claw marks had been scratched into the floor and walls. Alex laughed nervously. "Probably just a raccoon. Or maybe your invisible friend, Kevin." Kevin didn't respond. He sat in the corner, humming softly, his gaze fixed on the scratched planks. Then Kevin said something that sent chills down their spines. "He doesn't like when you make fun of him." The group shrugged it off. But that unease, the feeling of being watched, lingered. A week later, Alex didn't show up at the treehouse. The group figured he was sick or grounded, but when they stopped by his house, his parents were frantic. Alex had gone missing the night before. Ben's voice trembled. You think he's with your friend, Kevin?" Kevin's face was pale. He said Alex shouldn't have laughed at him. That night, the remaining three returned to the treehouse, hoping to find clues. Instead, they found Alex's backpack and his flashlight, both sitting in the corner. The claw marks had spread, covering the walls like a sinister tapestry. Suddenly, a loud thud shook the treehouse. Then another and another, like footsteps climbing the ladder. The kids screamed and bolted, leaving the treehouse behind for good. Years passed and the group grew up. They rarely talked about what happened that summer, but the memory haunted them. One day, Ben decided to revisit the woods. Big mistake, right? Because we all know revisiting cursed places is how bad things happen. The treehouse was still there, barely standing, covered in moss and decay. As Ben climbed the creaky ladder, he felt a strange pull, like the air itself was heavier. Inside, it was just as they'd left it, except for one thing. Carved into the rotting wood were new claw marks, fresher than they should have been. And scrawled beside them were the words, "Welcome back, Ben." That night, Ben couldn't sleep. He kept hearing whispers, faint and chilling. When he finally drifted off, he had a vivid dream, or was it a dream, of standing in the treehouse again. But this time, he wasn't alone. A figure stood in the corner, its face obscured by shadows. It whispered in a raspy voice, "You forgot about me, didn't you?" Ben woke up drenched in sweat. Claw marks burned into his arm. He never went back to the woods again. Who's your invisible friend? Would you dare return to that treehouse? Let me know in the comments if you think you'd survive. If this story gave you chill, hit that like button and subscribe for more horrifying tales. And remember, sometimes what you can't see is far more terrifying than what you can. What would you do if something knocked back at you from the darkness? Would you run, or would you answer, "Welcome to the terrifying story of two siblings who discovered a secret in their grandfather's treehouse, a secret that would change their lives forever." Every summer, Emma and Jake spent their vacations at their grandfather's old house in the country. The kind of house that had been in the family for generations. You know, the type of place that felt timeless until you started to look closer. It was a warm July evening when they found it. The old treehouse, buried deep in the woods behind their grandfather's house. "Hey, remember when we used to play in here when we were kids?" Jake said, brushing away the overgrown vines. Emma smiled, but her eyes were drawn to something strange, a feeling she couldn't shake. Something was off about this treehouse. "I don't know, Jake. It feels different this time." But Jake was already climbing the rickety ladder. "Different? It's just a treehouse. What's the worst that could happen?" Emma whispered, but Jake couldn't answer. He was already standing up, heading for the door. "Jake, no!" Emma cried, but he was already out of the treehouse, staring into the thick darkness of the woods. For a moment, everything was silent. Then from deep in the trees came the sound of a soft laugh, a laugh that sent chills down Emma's spine. It wasn't human. Jake's voice called back, low and shaky. "Emma, you need to come out here." But Emma hesitated. She didn't want to go. Something wasn't right. The woods had always felt safe during the day, but now the trees seemed alive with shadows that shouldn't be. She finally stepped outside, her legs shaking. But as soon as her feet hit the ground, she felt it. The presence of something watching her. The laughter returned, louder this time, but from behind her. She spun around, but saw nothing. Jake was still in the woods, moving towards something. No, someone. "Jake, stop!" Emma screamed, but he didn't hear her. He was hypnotized by something in the distance, something that called to him. She ran after him, but by the time she reached the spot, he was standing before the old tree where the treehouse had been built. There was a figure standing there, barely visible in the darkness. A child with hollow eyes, staring at Jake. "Who is that?" Emma whispered. Jake turned to her. His face was pale, but he said nothing. Then the child spoke. "Stay with us, forever." Jake reached out, his hand trembling, but Emma grabbed his arm just in time. "We have to go, now!" They ran back to the house, but as they looked back, the figure of the child was still there, watching them from the trees. Back in the house, they locked the doors. Emma checked the windows, but as she turned to Jake, he was gone. She rushed outside, calling his name, but there was no answer. The trees whispered, and the laughter returned. "Jake!" she screamed, but the only reply was a familiar knock, soft, deliberate, and too close for comfort. Do you think they made it out? Or are they still out there, trapped by whatever lurks in the woods? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more terrifying stories. And remember, some knocks are better left unanswered.